Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornbine. Please watch us on our Gracefully Graying YouTube channel, and as well as going to our website at gracefullygraying.com and like us and share us. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome as my guests Zenell Brown and Kaitlin Brown as we discuss some very important issues that are really facing our society regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome to Gracefully Graying. Zenell.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Why don't you first of all tell our viewers a little bit about your background and who you are?
Okay. Currently, I serve as the Executive Court Administrator for the Third Circuit Court in Wayne County. And I've been with the court for 23 years almost. And I started out as a domestic relations caseworker, basically. And I went there to becoming a friend of the court attorney. From friend of the court attorney, mediator, supervisor, director, eventually served as the actual friend of the court for the agency. And then now I'm serving under Chief Judge Timothy M. Kinney as his executive court administrator. So that's my background, a lot dealing with the court, a lot dealing with family law, and now with court administration overall.
Kaitlin, tell our viewers about who you are and your background.
Thank you so much, Henry, and thank you for being here. It's a wonderful program you have going. My background, it's an interesting question, right? We all jump to the professional. Professionally, I'm a shareholder at Maddin Hauser. I practice primarily in the employment law group and do some corporate work as well. But I work very closely with employers, and I help them try to make the right decision the first time to avoid any liability later, right, that might come with making the wrong decision. And so we do a lot of training with management, with owners, a lot of work with HR on how to hire, how to manage, how to fire employees. But in the spirit of the topic of this conversation, right, my background is so much more. I'm a mom with 2 young kids at home. I'm married to an attorney who works full time and supports me fully in doing all the other crazy things. I'm involved in the community, which we'll talk about today. And I would say this is my second career. Before becoming an attorney, had a stint in New York City where I was making documentaries and involved in production for shows on Discovery Health and National Geographic. And then I got the idea of I wanted to become an attorney, went to law school, moved to Michigan. So I'm also a transplant, right? I've lived in Colorado. Yeah, so a lot of different background. And I think as we go through the podcast today and have a conversation with you, Henry, we'll learn that there's so many different layers to people, right? And backgrounds are not only what we choose to portray, but also what we ask of people and what we learn or what we might not learn. So I'm just kind of scraping the surface here on some of the topics we'll cover, but background and who we are is a very deep conversation. Mm-hmm. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being part of this. Zenell, tell us what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean. And I'm going to ask the same question of you in a minute, Kaitlin.
So for me, the diversity piece means that you have variety, you have different people, different backgrounds. The equity piece means that you recognize those different backgrounds, those people would have had a different experience. So in our workplace, for instance, if you look at the history of the workplace, you probably didn't have women actually integrating the workplace until the 70s. You probably didn't have minorities actually integrating the workplace to the 70s. So in your workplace, you'll probably have if you look in your higher echelon, you'll have a lot of white men there, but you may not have as many representatives from minority groups or women groups. So that's the equity piece, realizing that everyone is not starting off at the same place, and that sometimes there may need to be some programming to help people integrate themselves into the workplace or to integrate themselves and be prepared for promotion. And companies need to also be aware that because people come with different needs and different backgrounds, you may need something more to attract a variety group of people. You may need something more to keep those people there to make them feel welcome once you get there. And that's the inclusion piece. Do people feel that I'm included? I can come to work, not be your stereotypical or fit into any group necessarily, but I can come to work, be valued for the differences that I bring, whether it's my perspective as a woman, whether it's my perspective as an African American, whether it's my perspective because I am a mom, all of those things. And I can feel that I still belong in this workplace. The value that I have is actually appreciated. So that's the DEI for me in the most simplistic terms that I can think of.
Well stated. Kaitlin, your turn, same question, and I guess your view of those three issues.
Right. Zenell did a great job. The little additions I would maybe say is that diversity, when people hear it, might jump to its race, its gender, its age. But as Zenell mentioned, it's so much more. It's about family status. It's about maybe your economic background, the opportunities you've had along the way, whether it's because of your own doing or not. Even communication styles, right? Am I an extrovert or an introvert? And the more we understand the diverse backgrounds and characteristics of the people that we work with, then the more productive we can be. And yes, the more inclusive our workplace can be. So diversity is, yes, that variety of backgrounds and experiences that everyone just innately brings to the table. Equity, she did a great job explaining it. I just love, there's a visual out there of three people. And when we're talking about equity versus equality, the first picture of equality looks like a short person on one block, a medium-sized person on one block, and a tall person on one block. And really, they're still short, medium, or tall, trying to maybe reach up to this tree, and the tall person can reach it. Medium person maybe can't reach it without the block, but can with one block. And the short person still can't reach it, right? Whether without a block or with one block. And it's equality because each person got one block, right? Equity says we have to go beyond that. We have to say for this shorter person, maybe they need 2 blocks, maybe they need 3 blocks to reach that tree. And it's a conversation of what extra support do people need based on their backgrounds, and support looks different based on what the needs and experiences might be. So equity is a deeper conversation rather than just saying, blanket, here's what we're providing to all, right? Mm-hmm. That the blanket provided to all is equality, but going deeper, going beyond is equity. And then lastly, for inclusion, I love how Zenell was saying, it's about being able to bring your whole self, right? Regardless of my race, my gender, my age, my economic background, my communication style, if I can go into a workplace and feel valued, feel respected, appreciated, and able to bring my full self, then you have inclusion. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you can't disclose a part of your background or you have to change a part of yourself in order to be included, then that's a place that has not built an inclusive culture, and there may need to be some conversations to improve that conversation.
Zenell, as we're speaking, we have a president who lost the national election, who's refusing to step down. We are a very deeply divided society. I would say we are a racist society in many respects. So Zenell, what is the current state of affairs for diversity and inclusion for our nation and for our legal profession?
As a nation, I think we're being challenged right now. Can we take a real honest look at our systems and see that what looks to be race neutral may not be race neutral? No. Can we look to see what policies we need to change? Can we look to make sure that all voices are heard and that there's equity in our processes? Can we look at our institutions? And for me, the court system, the justice system is one definitely where we need to take those looks. For the Third Circuit Court, we had the opportunity to be involved in a project from the Vera Institute. They came and they looked to see who was actually in our jails and what were they in our jails for. First of all, we found out the population there was a large African-American population. When you look deeper, you saw that the offense that was done by an African-American, if it was done by a Caucasian, the disposition was different. And maybe the Caucasian person ended up getting probation, but the African-American person probably got a tether in probation or a fine in something. So it's like, when you get all this data, can you really take a look at it? And the look is not to then point blame, but to say, what is it that we can fix to make sure that this system really does look at everyone and make sure it works for everyone. So I think we have to do it at a national level. We have to do it at a state level. We have to do it inside the various institutions that we're working at. And our profession is one of them. We have 1.9 million lawyers in the nation. We have like 16% that are a minority. Why is that? Have we built the appropriate pipelines? What do we do about that? So we have to start having our conversations, asking a question, and having various people contribute to that conversation. And I think one thing we want to be very careful of, especially with the election results, that we're not closing out voices in that conversation. We need to have a very broad conversation to hear what people have to say. And like I said, it's not to blame. It's to say that we are all responsible for lifting these issues up and doing what's right.
Kaitlin, same question of you with regard to the current state of our nation and our legal system.
So Zenell hit it where we are divided, we're conflicted, but I also am seeing an opportunity here, right? We have a lot of momentum, I would say, through a spark of conversations. People are becoming more aware of these issues. They're becoming more willing to talk about these issues. And they're comfortable. They're uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to talk about my own biases, to realize that I have personal biases, and then talk with others and help them realize their biases. But I think these conversations are happening. People are becoming more open to the idea of this is a personal issue that maybe I need to work on, and also a community issue that I can be a part of. And if we can use that momentum to really fuel the fire and make this actually impact the numbers that we are seeing that are so disproportionate, I again think we have an opportunity here. The numbers that Zenell mentioned, where we are in the teens, right, as a legal community for minorities, is contrasting with a general market of workplace that is becoming the most diverse that it has ever been. Mm-hmm. And so when you have the numbers of a general workforce being the most diverse that it's ever been, with the legal market of what it is, I think that is exactly another opportunity where we can say, how are we creating that pipeline? How are we attracting the diverse talent? And how are we encouraging maybe the talent that doesn't even know a legal opportunity is a part of their potential future to consider it and then pursue it and succeed in it?
Kaitlin, why is it important for businesses and our legal community to consider the moral, legal, and business case?
So that's why I say I do a lot of work in the space of creating respectful workplaces, right? And employers come at it for a lot of different purposes. Some would say I come at it because of a moral case, right? It's the right thing to do. And especially with everything that transpired in this over the course of this summer, I think, again, there's a heightened awareness and businesses are wanting to do the right thing. There's a sense of I want people to feel included. I want people to feel comfortable having a conversation. And the more you do that with, the employees in a business, then the more productive they're going to be, the better mental health and mental state they'll have. So the moral case is I'm doing it because it's a right thing, right? The legal case that I talk about with employers is there's a compliance issue here, right? When you start treating employees differently based on a protected class, whether it's age or race and gender, and in Michigan, family status, right? Marital status, even misdemeanor arrest record, then that disparate treatment can lead to a legal claim, right? So what are we doing to take proactive steps in the workplace to be legally compliant, make sure that employees are given equal opportunities to employment, and when they're there, they're treated without discrimination or harassment? So that legal compliance is also a meaningful reason because you want to avoid all of the litigation and legal cases that might result, right? And also, again, going back to the verse, it's the right thing to do, the moral case. The step that I would say I'm hearing more commonly now, though, is it's not just the right thing. It's not just the legal thing. It is the best thing for my business. And that is really the business case, right? And there are tons of numbers coming out, statistics saying that if you have a more diverse workforce, you'll have greater innovation. You'll even have increased revenue if you have diverse boards. You'll attract the top talent. You'll retain your talent. And so now businesses are saying, all right, it's not just the right thing to do. It's not just the compliant thing to do. This is the best thing for my business to promote my growth, to get the best employees. And that's where, I think there's been an evolution in awareness and commitment to the process as businesses walk through each of those steps.
So now, what can businesses and other legal organizations do to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
I believe a good starting point is to have someone like a consultant like Kaitlin, and then to sit down and look at your business and say, where is it that we want to be? How do we become more inclusive? How do we become more diverse? And to actually put a plan together, because you're going to have to be deliberate. You're going to have to be intentional. And I don't think that you're going to get very far if you just capitalize, oh, once a year we're going to have a diversity potluck, or once a year we're going to spotlight something. It has to be something that is deliberate, planned out, and it's becoming embedded in your culture where it's an everyday norm. The conversation that we're having today can't be this conversation that we had on November 11th, and that's it. It has to be the conversation we have on November 12th, the conversation on November 13th. A lot of organizations, as individuals, need education for the leadership. They need education for the staff. They need education and some type of connection to the community that they're serving as well. So you educate and you put some type of actionable item there that you plan on doing with some measurables within a specific time frame. But definitely the starting point is, let's spark the conversation. What is it that we're trying to get? What is it that we need? What is it that we're missing? And how do we do it? Be willing to be uncomfortable, like Kaitlin was saying.
Kaitlin, let me throw the same question at you that Zenell just expounded on.
So what can businesses do practically? This is what I work with employers every day on, right? It's not just top down, it has to be bottom up, and then it's also even inside out, right? You can't just have the window dressing and say this is who we are without it being authentically true. And so having leadership support is great, because then you can establish committees that will evaluate your demographics, compare them to who are the applicants who are trying to get the jobs, and do those numbers match? If they don't, then why is there a gap? What can we do to bridge that gap? And what talent are we missing there, right? So evaluating your pipeline, evaluating the demographics of your current workforce. Bottom up can be things like employee resource groups, right? Employees who say, I need support here. I want to be with other families, or I want to talk with other veterans. I want to talk with other people who are aging. And we'll have some common goals, and we'll identify maybe some ways that the organization can change and better support us, right? Employee resource groups are great ways to promote engagement and that inclusive environment. The inside out is being transparent about your processes. What does it take to get a position? Do those criteria really matter to the job? And who might you be excluding, either intentionally or unintentionally, as a result of that process? Also for promotion from within, right? How do people get promoted? How do you succeed in the organization? If you can be transparent about that process, then again, people will know the benchmarks they need to meet, and it won't result in a feeling that someone has to work harder just because they're maybe in a protected class or one of these underrepresented groups, which is a common feeling, right? That someone who's underrepresented has to work harder to get the same opportunity or the same promotion as somebody else who is in the majority group and already represented at the top. So we have to really look internally and externally as to what is the business looking like now? What is their culture? How do we promote a diverse workforce by attracting that workforce? And then once they're there, making sure they can succeed and maybe even become leaders in the organization. So those are a couple of suggestions. There are a lot of details within there about how you hire and how you advance, but that is the big picture of what businesses should be considering.
Zenell, what can the courts do?
There's a lot the courts can do. I'm going to just jump off of what Kaitlin was saying, but I'm going to be more specific about courts themselves. The court is usually attached to law schools and bar associations. We deal with them on a daily basis. So what would it look like if you had a conversation with the women lawyers of Michigan? What is it that their experience is as women lawyers when they're coming into the courtroom? What would it look like if you're having a conversation with the Black women lawyers or the Hispanic lawyers? What about if you talk with the various bar sections that represent affinity groups? What are their experiences? And are they able to fully participate in coming into the courthouse? For some people, it's just as difficult as, do you have a ramp if somebody's in a wheelchair? For others, it's like for young moms, do you have a lactation room? Things like that. And it doesn't even get yet to the law and arguing before the court. It's just, how do you come into the courthouse? You can go around your courthouse and you can look and say, okay, if I was a person who didn't have sight, what would be some of the challenges? And then start thinking of, what can I put in place? Bar associations are a good place to tap for that information. Law schools as well. It's a big item, an attraction item for those who are in law school to know that there will be hiring and work in a diverse atmosphere. So you want to see what is it that you're looking for when you get hired by a court? Where are we recruiting at? How, like Kaitlin was saying, how do we prepare you for the positions that we're offering in the court? And transparency, definitely. There is so much courts can do, and I think courts have the advantage of having so many avenues in which to travel this to figure out, where do I start, where do I begin?
Kaitlin, can you add anything to this topic of what the courts can do in the legal system?
Right. So I don't have as much involvement in the courts as Zenell, but the bar associations that she mentioned, I've been very involved in the Oakland County Bar Association, and I'm I'm the chair of their diversity and inclusion committee. And I'll just say that as a part of that committee, we have created a seat at the table for every affinity bar who overlaps with the Oakland County Bar. When I say affinity bar, it's the ones that Zenell mentioned, right? The Hispanic bar, the even Irish bar, there's a Catholic bar. There are about 20 different bar associations that are a collection of attorneys based on their personal identification, religion, other characteristics, national background. And we've said, come to the table, right? Be a part of the conversation. We need to hear from you. And we've learned so much from it. And we are having monthly meetings on different topics. We've had a conversation on disability. We are having a conversation this month about LGBTQ and how we can best serve clients who identify in those categories. And then we're hoping to have one in February during Black History Month on the awareness, for African Americans and Black population. How can we better serve and engage those attorneys and those clientele? So we're having conversations. And I think when we're talking about courts, bar associations, businesses, and even just personal lives, we can always start by thinking about who are we inviting to the table and who could we invite? What would we learn from inviting somebody else to join? And that benefit is really tremendous. So I would just encourage, regardless of where you are in the legal community or in our general, Michigan community and national community, think about who you're engaging the conversation and who you could or maybe should invite to join you.
Zenell, books such as How to Be Anti-Racist, Caste, and White Fragility are topping bestseller lists. And I read Caste. It's mind-blowing. I read the author who's brilliant, her prior book about migration from the South to the North and following several families. But one thing that stuck in my mind is how racist America is and how caste-driven it is. And an example was the fact that Nazi Germany, when they set up their racist laws, took many of our laws from the South. So, Zenell, take it away.
Those are excellent books. And as far as caste, I loved Isabella Wilkerson's. I don't know if you can hear my clock dinging, sorry. I loved her bringing in the Indian caste system, what was going on in Germany and what was going on in America, and telling you how closely those were related. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. And I haven't even finished the book because the read is so intense. And it's like, okay, when you look at the American history, you find this out. It's like, okay, I got to close my eyes and sort of push that aside and process it. Then I read another piece. But it's telling you, let's wake up. We love America. We love America. But we also have to realize America wasn't perfect in how she got to the place she is. And there's still a lot of work to go forward. So let's get really real about what our history is. Let's educate each other on that history, and let's realize that we can do better. As far as how to be an anti-racist, we are quick to say, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not racist. And it's like, okay, well, let's move the needle a little further. Let's not just be a not racist, let's be an anti-racist. Let's actually engage and take on the racism that exists in our systems. And let's take on the implicit biases that we have and start disrupting those. And then white fragility, it's the opportunity for the white community to look at, well, how have we tried to avoid this uncomfortable conversation? And how do we get prepared to have this conversation? Realizing that there have been some privileges that have been afforded to us because of the color of our skin. And we need to be able to have that conversation and to hear some things that may be dissettling. Maybe, most of us were not born or into the slavery era, but we have inherited a system that was built on slavery. And we need to be able to talk about that and to look to see where do we go from here to make sure that we're living up to this ideal of America that we basically preach. So I think all the literature out there is doing a very great job. Definitely some good reading, definitely some conversation should come after that, some book club discussions, everything. The opportunities are there, and it's there for the individual, it's there for our organization, it's there for us as a profession. I'm involved in the Detroit Bar Association, and they're doing a lot of the discussions. They're bringing a lot of trainings. I'm involved in the Michigan State Bar ADR section. They have a book club, and they're actually doing casting. They've done white fragility. So just having these conversations and making sure that when we're doing the conversations, that it's not just people from minorities or underrepresented groups, that we're having the conversation with majority representation in the room too, and that we're talking through these issues and trying to figure out what's next, what can we do better.
So now, how do these messages apply to our legal profession as well?
So like I said, if you look at our legal profession, you know that we have an underrepresentation of minorities. We know that women are still not in certain high-ranking areas such as partnership, and there hasn't been a lot of movement. There's been very incremental movement, but at the point in time that we start getting very real and having these conversations, not just saying, oh, I can't find a minority applicant, but looking at how are you recruiting? Where are you recruiting? How are you developing talent? Not just saying that, oh, okay, a woman of a certain age, she's only going to give so much because children are going to be our priority, but maybe seeing how do we change our work environment where there can be a work-life balance if that's what someone's looking for. So really going and digging deep and not just saying this is the way things is, this is the way things are, and if somebody's not excelling in it, it's because it's a personal thing. No, maybe it's a system thing, and we really need to look at our systems.
We're down to less than a minute, and we barely scratched the surface. A few final thoughts from each of you in the remaining seconds. First of all, let's start with you, Zenell.
I think that this is probably one of the most challenging things that we have to look at as lawyers, and look at our profession and, really do an honest self-examination and being willing to reach out to have conversations with others. But I can't imagine any other profession who's more equipped to do it than us. We say that we're about justice, equal protection under the law. This is an opportunity that we really get to put that into action.
Kaitlin, your turn. Final thoughts before we sign off. And we have a lot more we haven't covered, and we're going to get there, if not today, another day.
So my thoughts are that you only have time for what you make time. So we need to be intentional about how we use our time and what conversations we're having. Are we really going to focus on meeting a billable number, or are we going to be focused on being a leader in the community and engaging the allies? If we're not in a minority group, what power or influence do we have that we could use to influence and direct the conversation? I will say some of the leaders in the Oakland County Bar Association have been the older white men, the presidents who have said, I'm committed to this. I want to have these difficult conversations. And, Jim Parks, Dan Quick, the current president, Keith Brooks, have all been leaders. And so don't make assumptions about people. Ask questions, be committed to have a conversation, and listen, because we each have a role in the conversation, and it starts with us individually, but then it reaches out as we start having conversations with a greater community.
Zenell Brown, Kaitlin Brown, I want to thank both of you for being our guests on Gracefully Graying. This is such an important topic, and we've got a lot more to explore. And again, thank you. We're out of time. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying today, and I also want to remind all of you to go to our Gracefully Graying YouTube channel and also our Gracefully Graying website. like us, and share us. Thank you again.